Good evening and welcome to Momentous Live, episode 108. I'm Tristan Jutra.
I'm Will Silver.
And I'm Greg Williams. Helm to 108.
And unfortunately, the lovely and talented Tasia Custodi could not be with us this evening because she is making herself even more beautiful than usual, and we are not allowed to share the photographic evidence of that highly technical process. However, the three of us will soldier on. And if you'd like to learn more about not just the three of us, but the four of us, you can visit momentus.tv/links. Or if you want to find out more about the individual team members, momentus.tv/teams. And that's all we're going to talk about for now. So let's get to some follow-up, shall we? Get rid of that little subtitle. And I guess I should share the screen. And now it's more complicated. And here it is. And did I do the right thing or the wrong thing? Please stand by. Dadgummit. So, how's it going, Gray?
Quite well, actually. Things are good.
Excellent.
Yep.
How's your week been?
Good. Didn't have to do any screen sharing, so that was positive.
Well, that's a relief. It makes things a lot less complicated when you don't have to. You have to do that. All right. So these tabs are out of order here because everything's awesome. Okay, so here we go. A little bit of follow up. What could be more fun than some follow up about AI gone wrong? Nice. ChatGPT invented a sexual harassment scandal and named a real law professor as the accused. So this is just another cautionary tale about the various generative AI platforms, including the large language models such as ChatGPT, Bing Chat, and Google Bard that we've all come to know and love over the last few months. In this particular case, the ChatGPT misrepresented key facts about a certain professor, basically embroiling said professor in a sexual harassment case that this person was not involved with at all. And the kicker is it even invented or hallucinated, as they say, source materials. So it did cite one article that was about, said misconduct, didn't involve this person, and then cited other articles or that were totally manufactured, totally fabricated. So one of the things that we've come to understand about these large language models is that they're great at language, but we use language to tell stories, and they're not always factual stories. So if you're ever using tools such as Google Bard or ChatGPT, maybe don't rely on them for facts so much. Do some fact checking, because these misconceptions can have real world consequences, such as affecting people's careers. Will, in your uses of these AI tools recently, have you encountered anything, be it on the image generation side or on the text generation side, that's been a little hinky, a little potentially scandalous, so to speak, that you might share with us?
Not really. I mean, I had a programmer that I work with said that he asked ChatGPT something about an algorithm, and it was using a constant or some sort of mathematical formula that it completely made up. So it was actually wrong. And when he checked it with somebody else, he basically went 2 days assuming that ChatGPT was right and realized that the whole basis of it was wrong. Luckily, it didn't ruin a ton of work because it just sort of changed that in a few pieces, but he kept on wondering why it wasn't working properly. And then he figured out that ChatGPT was just wrong. So, but he was saying that it likes to sound like it's confident, but it doesn't always know what it's talking about. So
just like with people, sometimes, I mean, the greatest BSers in the world are those people who give very, very confident answers with little hesitation, just like ChatGPT does, and doesn't necessarily mean what they're saying is true.
Yeah.
Gray? How about yourself? Any experience with these AI tools in generating things that are, but hopefully not dangerous, but potentially dangerous, or simply scandalous or hilarious?
Um, I mean, I've used the program so far to do some research on things, but checking it against other sources, and
Good call.
it's been right most of the time, but the most of the time is actually not all of the time, which means this is just doubling up on work, right? I mean, it's great to have this lovely summary of things that some of it is correct. It kind of this, what Will just said, what reminded me of, I can't remember which episode it was, but it was season 6 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and Captain Picard and Dr. Crusher are lost on a hostile planet, and she asked him like, which way, and he sort of, this way, and she goes, and they get about 10 steps. She's like, you have no idea, do you? And he says, that's actually the job of being the captain. When no one knows which way to go, you boldly go that way because you got to go somewhere. So
boldly go,
even
if you don't know where you're going,
or go boldly. But so, I mean, looking at this, the idea of, think back to when Wikipedia came out, right? Wikipedia was much maligned because it was editable by people. And we saw that correct things were added, incorrect things were added hostily. And it has turned out to be a relatively reliable resource. Not a completely reliable resource, but a relatively reliable resource. I think that's what we're going to see with ChatGPT. It's a fool right now who would trust it implicitly.
Yes.
So you can tell where I said that, sorry. But looking at this going forwards, I mean, we might actually have different AI units checking each other's work. We could have a cascade failure where all of them decide that something that is incorrect is correct, but what could possibly go wrong?
And we start getting into, and that's where we get into those generative adversarial networks, whereby it's not necessarily fact checking each other, but checking to see if what is being generated is convincing enough to pass the test of the other. So, in some ways it's a bit of these could be a bit of a safeguard, but not entirely. Until such point as we're confident that the AIs are actually clear on what the facts on the ground.
I think too, the other thing Gray was kind of mentioning, and I think it's been mentioned many times, but I'll mention it again, is that I brought up the example a while ago that I was doing some coding, and it was doing things that were wrong because the language or its references are old. So me and my coworker looked at something and it's like, that doesn't exist anymore. And so we had to tell ChatGPT that there's a newer version, and then pasted the code that was there, and ChatGPT fixed it, but it was running off of old code.
Mm-hmm.
So it led us in the wrong direction. But once we told it, like, hey, no, you're saying things that no longer exist.
Yeah, and from our experience so far with our business, what we found is it's being proficient with language. It's good at doing things like summaries. You paste in a bunch of text, and even if it's like, even for social media, as Tasia's used quite a lot, finding a decent pull quote or a summary tweet, something to share on social media to get people's attention and entice them to click and read what the destination article is all about. And again, doing first drafts of anything, based on an established set of facts that you either feed it or from what it knows in its knowledge base. Bing Chat may have a bit of an advantage because it is connected to the web, but it's not quite as flexible in other ways. The interface isn't super great. The good news is that if you've got chatbots that are either leading you the right way or even the wrong way. Now, Poe, which we've talked about in the past, which is from the team that brought you the question and answer website, Quora, they've been adding a number of chatbots to their app, some of which are based on OpenAI's ChatGPT, the various models, and some based on other models as well, including Bard from Google. But they've added a new feature that lets you make your own kind of quasi-custom bots using prompts and then saving them in your sidebar along with the other chatbot models that are there. So what this might look like, for example, is you choose ChatGPT 3.5 or ChatGPT 4 if you've got access to that, or one of the others, and then you assign it an avatar, and then you give it a little description and some initial prompts. You give it a little personality, and it could be your bot that talks like a pirate all the time, if that's what you prefer, or your bot that has, a particular style, or you could even do level of complexity. Have it speak to you at a level of a fifth grader, for example. So that's actually pretty handy from an interface point of view, because you may be wanting to work on things that require different, or that have different audiences, and having all that in one place could be handy. I have to check to see if there's a web interface, because I find using the iOS app is not super convenient there. But it looks like there is. You could use it on the iPad. Worst case, I got to look a little deeper and see if you can do that on the web, because having a few different bots at your fingertips there, especially ones that are set up to go in specific ways, would be handy. It's kind of like how ChatGPT, you can have your saved chats there, and it'll remember context from your previous conversations to a certain extent, at least. But this is just like a different take on that, in a bit of more of a user-friendly interface. So in other AI news, this is a bit of a news story, is AI is being used to help crack our passwords now. How do you like that? Will, I know that you are always concerned about security. We have chats about that once in a while. So in this terrifying study, it shows how fast AI can crack your passwords if you are not rocking the particularly secure passwords. According to this study, 51% of common passwords can be cracked in less than a minute, 65% in less than an hour, 71% in less than a day, and 81% of common passwords can be cracked in less than a month. So we just want to bring this to folks' attention, because there are some basic guidelines you can use to help make sure that you're using secure passwords. I know Gray has got a tip that will make very secure passwords that we'll throw to him in a moment. But if you're the type of person that likes to create your own passwords, and we all know it's not a good practice to use the same password on every site, and some of us tend to use formulas for passwords, depending, based on the website that we're using. So in these guidelines here, you can see based on the number of characters, how quickly passwords can be hacked from depending on the composition of your password. So if it's numbers only, lowercase letters, uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, upper and lowercase letters, and uppercase, lowercase letters, and symbols. So you can see, if you anywhere up to 11 numbers, it can be cracked instantly. And once you go above 11 numbers, you're getting into seconds, minutes, eventually days. If you have 18 numbers as your password, okay, 10 months. Once you start adding lowercase letters and uppercase letters and symbols and things like that, right away it starts taking much longer for these systems to crack your passwords. Ultimately, if you have an 18-character password and you're using all these different types of characters, it could take 6 quintillion years. So, that's until, of course, quantum computing comes along. So, if you're still making up your own passwords in your head, again, you're not using the same passwords on every site. Hopefully, make sure you tweak them a bit for each site, but use numbers, lowercase letters, uppercase letters, and symbols. The more numbers, the better. 13 is kind of where you want to be at the very least, because even if you're using those 3 elements, you see this big jump from 12 to 13. You go from 30,000 years up to 2 million years. We'll see when quantum computing starts, working on our passwords, how quickly it can be done. There's some scary news there. Now, Gray, you've got you rely on another tool to generate passwords for you, which may make it a little difficult to remember things should said tool go offline. But what do you use? Oh, hang on, I'm going to unmute you because we were getting some background noise. There we go.
I use a combination of two tools. One is the password tool in iOS and macOS, and the other is 1Password. And so I've got a family plan for 1Password. It's a subscription. Uses a secure vault, which is localized on your device. Can also be synced into the cloud. And I think I can't remember. It's way over 256 bit AES encryption. Good enough. The one on iCloud that was actually the one that I've been using the most, and it's actually been quite good because, like 1Password and a few other services, it analyzes the passwords that you have based on a hash. So it doesn't actually see your passwords, but it can see if that hash has been found in a hack somewhere. So it will let you know if you've been owned, and will actually take you to the website to change the password that has been co-opted. This one's great. I mean, it syncs with your phone, syncs with your Mac. I don't know if it's actually got a tool for Windows. I had one for iCloud for a while, but I couldn't tell you.
And so you had mentioned just trying to learn if your password had been part of a data breach, and one of the sites, popular sites for discovering that is haveibeenpwned.com, where you put in your email address and it'll show you all the data, all the leaked sets of passwords that your account may be involved in. Now, luckily, in most cases, the websites will have advised you to change your password upon login. But these things are happening, all the time. And sometimes they're from large organizations. LinkedIn had a breach a number of years ago, and so I had to go and change my LinkedIn password. Now, Will, without doxing yourself too much, what sort of system do you use? Any third-party systems for generating those long exotic strings of alphanumeric passwords with symbols in there as well? Or are you Mr. Password 1234, 12345 kind of guy?
No, I have pretty random passwords. So I'm not going to jinx myself and say they're the most secure ever, but it's a good combination of random crap and stuff that I can remember. So it's a mixture of both. Because I'm sort of out there in the public, I make sure it's nothing that's obvious. Yeah, it's obscure.
Momentous TV 69. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Molotov beats 1, 2, 3, 4. Molotov rocks. No, it's fairly obscure stuff and a mixture of random generated stuff. I also do use some of the tools that Gray has mentioned for various projects that I do. So to collect passwords and to protect passwords and ensure encryption and keep up to date and get reminders on how long it's been since something's been updated, and I rotate them all the time. And I think another tip is don't use the same password for everything. That gets annoying because then you have, in our lives, I mean, I can't even count how many passwords I have. So it's, but it's really wise. I mean, one of the things that, these bad actors will do is try to get into something low level and then use that password to get into other things. If they can hack one site and
your email account is the big one, right? Because once they've got control of your email, then they can be resetting your passwords for all different sites.
Yeah, but even then they sometimes go after websites that may seem innocuous, but then they take the information and start putting that stuff into Gmail or cryptocurrency sites. Or I had a weird one, Tristan, I asked you about it, where I got this thing from a cryptocurrency site that I have nothing to do with, and it was telling me that my password recovery was not going to happen. I was like, well, I never did a password recovery. I have no idea what this was.
Maybe I should click on this link just in case.
No, and there was no link. That was the other thing, is that there was no link. No, I remember telling you, and you were like baffled. And the only thing you could think is that someone was like jamming in a bunch of information and trying to just, they were somehow getting passwords from, I don't know, the LinkedIn data breach or another data breach. And we're trying to put things in and it wasn't working.
Oh, well, it's always a good time when stories like this come up to think about some best practices, do a little password audit wherever it possible, to be using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, and using preferably an SMS is fine, is better than nothing. Preferably authenticator app-based multi-factor authentication using, say, Google Authenticator or Authy or Microsoft Authenticator. Of course, as we've mentioned, not reusing passwords across multiple accounts, like Gray does, using auto-generated passwords when possible, if that works with your personal system. Updating passwords regularly, especially for sensitive accounts. You got to be careful with this one, because there are some enterprise organizations which, as a policy, forced people to change their passwords, say like once a quarter. And studies have been done on that, where it actually can make systems less secure, because a lot of people try to remember their passwords. So when they're being changed so frequently, we'd start doing things like writing passwords on sticky notes and putting them on their computer. We've all seen that sort of thing. So, take this one with a grain of salt, but maybe, if you're using a password manager, that's okay. And especially for your most sensitive accounts, such as banking and email and your crypto accounts and the like. And the other one here is refrain from using public Wi-Fi, especially for banking and similar accounts. Again, if you're doing banking on public Wi-Fi, your connection is going to be encrypted, but there may be other things that are being sent in the clear, such as unencrypted email or FTP and whatnot. So some of our data plans are getting so generous now that in a lot of cases, it's not even worth using public Wi-Fi if you're fortunate enough to have a pretty beefy data plan for your cell connection, if you're tethering to your phone or simply using the data connection on your phone. But anyhow, a few things there to bear in mind as best practice to keep your passwords safe, because it's no fun when that can of worms gets opened. Speaking of no fun, let's talk about Twitter.
Sounds good.
There's a little bit of Twitter drama earlier this week we're not going to talk about, with Substack being the newsletter service launching a potential competitor to Twitter, and then all of a sudden Substack embed codes weren't working, or Twitter embeds weren't working properly in Substack newsletters, and Substack links weren't working properly in Twitter, and that was a whole drama that seems to have resolved itself. But in larger Twitter news, Gray's going to tell us about how Twitter might not actually exist anymore as a corporation. What's all that about, Gray?
Well, it's a little like baking a cake, and you have to fold the ingredients in together to get this luscious, wonderful mixture that you then throw in under the heat to get this thing to rise. I think that's what Elon's hoping for here. Twitter does not exist as an individual corporate entity anymore. It's been folded into X Corporation, which we've seen how far Elon was willing to go for a kitchen sink joke. I think this is really just him going for an X go and give it to you joke. So it's this is where we are. Is we've been reduced to alphabet on one side and one letter on the other, with Bezos in the middle, and Zuckerberg trying to figure out what the hell he's going to do next.
Oh yeah, we've got Meta too. So this isn't unprecedented with these. These umbrella companies being used to gather, their subsidiaries underneath. So what do you think the play is here? It sounds like he may be, wait, tell us about the two angles. One angle seems to be perhaps reorganizing some of his other organizations under X. He's got interest in Boring Company and Hyperloop, and of course there's SpaceX and Tesla and whatnot. And SpaceX and Tesla are public companies, so that might be a little complicated. So there's the corporate reorganization side of it, but then there's also the super app side of it. So why don't you take us through those two angles?
So looking at it from the sort of like the corporate behemoth side, we've already seen a lot of synergies, love that word, between all of Elon's companies. And so looking at how the Boring Company could support perhaps SpaceX, I've talked about this before, right? You've got the rockets that take the drills up into space, they slam them down onto planets, they dig tunnels, you got a base, it's all powered by, Tesla solar. There it is. Like you've got a colony machine there. The one thing that is missing though is social anxiety. And so I think this is really where it comes in. And so
well, we need that on Mars.
Yeah. I mean, there's no source of social anxiety on Mars that we know of. So it'll be our number one export.
Yeah, just active fear of death on an ongoing basis.
Well, it's get to us to Mars. The better to
yeah, so this So, I mean, according to the Nevada Secretary of State's online business portal, Elon registered 2 new businesses in Nevada on March 9th, X Holdings Corp and X Corp, and then applied to merge those 2 businesses with 2 of its existing companies, X Holdings 1 with X Holdings Corp and Twitter Inc. with X Corp. And just goes on. Like, there's all these different holding companies in Delaware. There was X Holdings 1, X Holdings 2, X Holdings 3. This just, I mean, I know that his finances are a lot trickier since, he leveraged himself a little bit to actually buy Twitter. Hopefully with this reorg, things will settle down a little bit and he can focus on building the super app of his dreams, which could, this is a long process, and he's a patient guy, as we've seen with Tesla and with SpaceX. So what is this super app? And, we've seen similar things with WeChat and the like. Yeah. So what would one do with a super app, and that this mystery X project could be?
Most likely enter a dystopian future where you're going to be eaten by robots. Think of it this way. We absolutely do not want a super app, because one place for all things to all people is that we've seen so many movies and read so many books about how this is the death of the human species, because one megalomaniac is going to be in charge of it. Looks like we've already got a guy applying for the job, and that's the end of us, right? It's Horizon, the PlayStation game. That's the basis of that game. WeChat's doing it. So what we have here is a stupid app space race, where we've got these 2 super apps that could be all things to all people in various continents. A super app, essentially, it's your social media app. It's your banking app. You can order food on it. You can get your dry cleaning. It becomes
hail a ride
in an app. And this is really, it's the opposite of the free and open internet. WeChat has been used to silence dissent. People disappear off social media all the time under WeChat. So looking at this, I can see the case being made. We need to have a super app of our own. It sounds a whole lot like what happened in the 1950s with the arms race. It's going to be tough. Like, when you see 1 billion people in China who are consolidated under this, and the buying power that comes along with that, the control of information that comes along with that, there are going to be a lot of people making the case that we need that here. We don't.
It seems especially hubristic, given that the closest thing we might have to a super app in the West is like Facebook. And but Facebook's gone a couple of different directions with that. I mean, there's so many features built in with Marketplace and, the events feature and the Messenger, which they carved off into a separate app that we talked about recently. That was controversial. And now they're giving the option to roll it back in. And they've tried to do a lot. There's the gaming aspect of it. And with, pushing 3 billion monthly active users on Facebook, if there are certain things that they still can't make work, like you don't have things like, ride hailing in there. Facebook video never became a realistic competitor or viable competitor to YouTube. Facebook Reels, I mean, it's a pale imitation of TikTok and the like. So, I mean, does anyone really have the chutzpah to do what WeChat has been able to do in China, given the differences in culture, given maybe in the West our hesitation to put all our eggs in one app basket, so to speak, since we maybe are a bit more suspicious of centralized control and authority and the like. Will, if you had to choose a world where you had to use, several apps to do all the things that you wanted to do. Say it was like ordering your takeout food, hailing a ride, seeing what your friends are up to, watching cat videos, and would you prefer this world where it's kind of fragmented all over the place, multiple apps, or consolidated into one convenient app for you, ruled by a hopefully benevolent dictator?
Yeah, I mean, there's a fine lines here. I mean, I think I like the idea of streamlining. I do find, I'm involved with a group right now that is doing some chatting on Discord, and I never see any of it because I just don't go on Discord. I've got too many chat apps. I got, people messaging me on Messenger. I got people messaging or Facebook Messenger, on Instagram, on Twitter, on all these different platforms, Slack, all these things. And like, there's only so many of them that I'm going to use if they're all sort of basically doing the same thing. At the same time, I'm a big believer, and I've said this before, I say this often about Photoshop, is that there's something to be said for specializing and doing what you're good at. I love Photoshop. It's the thing that I use the most. But did you know it also does animation? Did you know that it also does 3D stuff? Did you know that it also does this and that and this and that? And it had HTML at one point that you could make website. Like, too much. Stop Photoshop. Just do what you do well. So that's where I just think with some of these things, you need, you know what I mean, some sort of specialties. And that's where things like Facebook end up losing out, when they just half cocked put in something that's, you know, video or something, when YouTube's doing it better, or when somebody else is doing this or that aspect of it better. So everyone's trying to add in TikTok things. You know, it's like, are any of them beating TikTok? No. So
TikTok is now the biggest app in the world, by the way, which is banana pants.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that, like, I think that it's better if you do something that you specialize, and I'm not opposed to branching out, or, you know, I can understand having a message app when you're inside of that app, but it just, there's too many people doing the same thing. And if you don't do it well, or plant your flag in some unique way, or make it desirable, then it's just going to be lost in the shuffle. I don't need Discord. I really don't. The main reason I use it is for Midjourney. So I mean, like, if there was another interface for Midjourney, then I would use that. I just don't need another solo messaging app.
And Discord's an interesting example of something that came up from the gaming world, and people were using a lot for, you know, for text messaging and, you know, voice calls and whatnot while gaming, and has found a use in other communities as well. And then more recently as an AI generation, image generation interface for Midjourney and others, which is kind of wild. But in a way, it replicates some of the functionality of Slack. Of course, Microsoft Teams has gone after Slack, and it's that age-old argument of the best of breed approach, where you have well-polished apps that do specific things, or the suite approach, say like the Microsoft Office, which can do everything you need, and everything will supposedly work together. Or like the Apple iCloud approach. You know, if you're going to live in the Apple ecosystem, you know, the promise is that things are going to work reasonably well. But when you start choosing from, the quote unquote best in each category, let's say you are, in the Apple ecosystem, but you prefer to use Signal for messaging, for secure messaging. And Gray, I know that you've used Signal a fair bit in the past. Well, you're going to lose a certain amount of integration there. So there are some trade-offs. Similarly, if you straddle worlds, like you're an Apple user and you do a lot of stuff in the Microsoft world, well, the Microsoft apps for Apple devices sometimes aren't quite as good or as functional. Excel being one of those key things, where you don't get to enjoy the same level of sort of nitty-gritty coding that people can do in Excel. So sometimes you have to, and then there's the whole Google ecosystem too. And of course, TECHIE is all in on the Google ecosystem, but she's also an Apple user. So there are some points of friction for her too. So this mirrors what we see in the whole app world too. And I guess the idea is that enough people will prefer the convenience of going for the suite of functionality in the one super app, like with WeChat. And that is the nut we have yet to crack here in the West. And remains to be seen if Elon can make this dream a reality. Which will be the super app to conquer Mars? Will it be WeChat, or will it be X? And Elon's owned X.com. So that was one of his, I think it was his second company after Zip2. And that's what eventually became part of PayPal, merged with PayPal. And that's how he became a founder of PayPal, was X.com. But he hung on to that domain name to use in the future. And he likes the letter X. We got SpaceX, one of his kids, it's got X in its name. And anyhow, that's the future we have to look forward to, that of the super app. but not just super apps. We got super audio gear coming up too. And Will, you're excited about the stuff that's coming up at NAMM. There's a number of product announcements, all sorts of things. We'll have a link in the show notes, different sorts of interfaces and fuzz boxes and guitars, more guitars, more reverb boxes and amps and mic audio processors and the like, so synth modules, lots of stuff going on. And I think NAMM has probably evolved a lot in the last number of years, what with so many creators at home, people like laptop musicians and people noodle around, beats makers and the like. What sort of stuff got you most excited from what we see coming up at NAMM, Will?
Well, first of all, I'll just mention, because for a while I was like, what does the second M stand for? So it's North American Music Merchant Association, I believe is what it stands for.
Yeah,
and it's
friend of the show, Jerome, has been to a number of those shows in the past too, having been a music producer and engineer and creator for decades now. So he's told me about NAMM show he's gone to in the past.
Yeah,
so
I really want to go some year. I mean, I would love to go with you guys, or just go in general. Now there's all sorts of things at NAMM, and some of the things I found, there's a lot of talk about guitars. There's a lot of talk, like you said, about fuzz boxes. But you also see things like microphones, synths, live music gear, speakers, things like that. So some of they've reissued some fun vintage guitar pedals, which is really nice, and there's some fun options there. There's another synthesizer as well. One of the things I was watching just about NAMM is, and I think Tristan and Gray, you probably have heard this kind of thing about things like E3 and other conferences. Some people wondering, because there's two sort of big giants, at least in the guitar world, with like Fender, doesn't have much of a presence. And part of the reason is they're too big. They're too big for NAMM. They'll do their own thing. So
kind of like Apple and CES, or
kind of like
even
Apple.
more and more companies like not even bothering with CES anymore, or E3. Like E3 in person got canceled this year because of like some of the Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo weren't going to be there, so they're like, why bother?
Yeah. Now, having said that, there still are a lot of products and a lot of companies, especially when you deal with DAW, the digital audio workstation, with companies that make plugins, companies that make microphones. So there's more than just guitars. One of the things I'm probably most excited for was kind of announced today, and the other, it's called the Flux. It's basically an interface for Serato. It's a sound card, but it also can power your laptop. It can interface with a tablet, and there's audio interface software called Algorithm, I think, that we've talked before on the show, that can help you DJ through even just a tablet. So there's a lot of cool options there. There's a great video by Mojax, who's a DJ, and he goes through it. He just loves it. It's particularly useful because there are mixers that have this sort of DVS sound card built into them, but old mixers or rotary mixers, or if you show up at a nightclub and you didn't bring your own mixer because it's heavy and expensive, you can just bring this small box and it can hook up to any mixer in your computer, basically. So just a fun little throwback, because there's been so much focus on putting these sound cards into mixers that it's nice to have an external box again. And many people have been really looking for some of these features, like being able to also power your laptop, so you don't need to plug in two devices. It can power all your peripherals. You can plug in other music devices, not just mixers and turntables. So it's a really handy box. I'm trying to convince / talk myself out of buying one. I don't need it. I don't need it. I swear.
How much is it?
It's I think it's somewhere around 450, I believe,
US, probably.
US.
Mhm.
So you're looking into the 500s. But yeah, it's a fun little device, and I think it's just this kind of thing is just, especially when you're old mixer collector like me, it's like, oh man, I could use DVS software with my old Vestax mixers. That would be awesome. So it's
all of them at once.
All of them at once. No, I do them. I get them because I love mixers. They're like pieces of art for me.
You're going to need more arms like that octopus DJ we saw at once.
Exactly. The other thing too, just to mention about NAMM quickly, because we've all been to CES, is that this tends to be from just, again, I'd love to talk to Jerome about this, someone who's actually been there, but I've been following NAMM for a number of years from afar, and it seems like most of the stuff is actually going to store, like it's, and for example, this Flux box, like they announced it before NAMM to show it at NAMM, but it's not like a secret because it's going to be on sale soon, right? So they're trying to,
and it's not a concept car that we're never going to see. For example.
It's not a concept car that we're never going to see, or a curved OLED TV 10 years ago that they made one of, and it's never going to come to market. So I think that's one of the things I also like about NAMM, is that this is probably stuff that you're going to see, if not right away, if not in the next couple months, sometime in the next year.
So Gray, from the links that Will has shared with us about what to expect at NAMM this year, is there anything that piques your interest at all?
I mean, a lot of it has been in software coming up to this. The stems feature that's been added into a lot of DJ gear, we're seeing more and more machines come up with that. I'm curious to see if Tractor is able to join the group with that built in. Right now, you can run Serato on a Tractor piece of hardware and have that work. But again, I buy the hardware and the software together for a reason. I'm kind of curious to see what Teenage Engineering is going to be up to. I haven't heard much out of them in the last little while, so I'm looking forward to seeing. They did a collaboration with IKEA, and did some cool stuff there. But I don't know, they always seem to have a weird take on things, and that's kind of it's the sort of weird off-brand stuff that I'm looking for at this point. All the big guys are doing really great things. They're doing expected really great things. It's sort of the what's next and what's weird. But Flux is one of those examples. Like, nicely done, Reloop. Yeah.
And with NAMM, there's always some surprises as well. Some stuff gets leaked before, but then often when the conference actually starts, there's a couple things that are surprises. To Gray's point, I think a number of, at least DJs in my circle, have been hoping that Tractor comes out with a Z2 Mark II or a Z3 or something. I don't know what they would call it. They've been focusing more on the controllers, but a lot of their hardware is kind of, not been neglected, but just hasn't been updated in a while. So it would be nice to see some new versions of them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving from forthcoming audio gear to forthcoming geeky movies and TV shows, we have a couple in the Marvel universe that look pretty intriguing, and one of which that I think I speak for all of us here when I mention, I suspect that we're all keen to see, and one is Secret Invasion, featuring prominently Nick Fury. This is a mini series. It's going to be on Disney Plus, and I guess I assume it digs deeper into the story with the Skrulls. Will, can you give us some thoughts on where you think that this series will be going from what you've seen in the trailer, and any of the backstory with Nick Fury and the Skrulls? And is this based on comic book canon, or are they kind of forging a new path here in the MCU?
They're forging largely a new path.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I guess the core story is an alien race that can disguise itself as human beings takes over people. That's pretty much the same. The source material is quite different. I read it a number of years ago. It had to do mostly with superheroes like Captain America and Mockingbird and Hawkeye and stuff like this. So we don't seem to be seeing any of those people here. Skrulls have actually been an enemy in the Marvel universe since I think like the 60s. They've been a long-term sort of antagonist of groups like the Fantastic Four in particular, with the Super Skrull and things like that. It's also very interesting that they sort of had a positive angle to the Skrulls in the Captain Marvel movie, where they're almost like refugees. So how this jives, and obviously we see, I forget the character's name, but the actor that you were just showing on screen, he seems to be also a good guy, and he's a Skrull. So Talos, I think his name is.
So they're retconning the Skrulls.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, Talos. Thank you, Gray. I got it just shortly before you reminded me, on the tip of my tongue. So yeah, so I mean, how that is definitely a new angle from the books. But you know, we've all talked numerous times, either on the show or in our personal lives, off camera, that you know, one of the great things that they're doing with the Marvel universe is they're taking some of the best parts, but then they're spinning it. And you know, things have changed so much in the MCU that they can't redo the story that they did in the comic books. So this is just a version with some of the underlying themes, just like Civil War had a civil war between heroes, but everything else was different. It wasn't even close. So that's what I'm predicting. You know, I could be wrong. None of us have seen it, but it seems quite radically different from the books so far.
Yeah. One of the cool things too about the TV shows that are being produced on Disney Plus with, you know, by Marvel, they combined Marvel, you know, the TV and movie producers now, is that we're seeing a lot more. We're seeing some of the secondary characters, such as Martin Freeman's character, who featured in Black Panther and Wakanda Forever. We're seeing the return of Maria Hill, played by Colby Smulders, who's a fan favorite, and a number of others, which is Don Cheadle, War Machine, as well. So it's nice to see some of those characters getting some more time, you know, in between movies, if they're going to feature in any of the movies. A lot of times these secondary characters don't get a ton of time in the blockbuster movies because they're competing for screen time with or they were at least with the Robert Downey Jr.'s of the world. And so it's nice to explore these worlds in this TV format, even if it's only a miniseries like this. So another world that is being explored, but going from combining the big screen and the small screen, is the Marvels. And that is, we just saw the first trailer for the Marvels, which features 3 Marvel. We got Captain Marvel, as played by Brie Larson. Gray, can you give us a little bit of a take on, you know, set the stage for us, what's happening with the Marvels here that we've seen from a variety of the Marvel TV shows, including Ms. Marvel, and I believe Rambo. She was in not only the Captain Marvel movie, but wasn't she in WandaVision as well?
She was in WandaVision, yes. She broke through the barrier there. I'm more the next story, I think. I haven't seen Ms. Marvel. Sorry.
No worries.
I can sub in.
All right. Yeah.
As well.
So Monica Rambeau, the other thing about her, just a fun backstory, is I think they're going to call her Spectrum. I don't know. I don't think they've given her that name yet, but she also in the books was a Captain Marvel in the 80s. So that's part of the reason why they're throwing that in, as she's a Marvel. So I think that's kind of fun. I think there's some backstory that's been alluded to in WandaVision between her and Captain Marvel, partly because of her mother, who, this is not a spoiler if you've watched any of the other shows, that her mother died of cancer. Her mother was previously in the Captain Marvel movie. We discovered that in WandaVision. I think it's just going to be sort of an interesting way of connecting the characters. Also, I have to say, I have not loved the character of Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, in the books, and I've said this before, they solved her. They fixed her in the show. It's actually an example to me of I like the character better in the MCU than I did in the books. And that I could go into the long, complicated reason why, and I think I might have said it on one of these shows, but just basically that they, instead of trying to shoehorn her in as an Inhuman because they didn't like the X-Men and mutants, they made her more her own character and really gave her a lot of personality. And the actress is wonderful in that role. Even in this trailer, I thought she's sort of the comic relief, the sort of oh gosh kind of character. Everything's happening and she's just so excited to be part of the team. So I think it's a really interesting sort of character piece between these two characters, and I'm actually really excited to see this. I didn't think I would be, but I am, and I think part of the reason is I actually really like the Miss Marvel character, and I also like Monica Rambeau. She was great in WandaVision, so I'm really thrilled to see those two characters. And like you said, Tristan, these are characters that were almost sort of supporting characters or had smaller roles on the small screen. On the streaming screen, whatever you call it. So it's nice to see them on the big screen and sort of all come together.
And Captain Marvel, although ostensibly like a pretty significant character, she's off doing stuff in the cosmos and just shows up at the last minute when everyone really needs her. I have to admit, I did appreciate was it Ms. Marvel? That was fun. It was a different type of story. And I know some fans are frustrated because of certain certain things that they see being done in the Marvel universe and in other universes as well, and the type of storytelling, the type of characters that are being focused on instead of those which primarily would get the most attention in the past. I think those concerns are less well-founded because it's fine to tell different kinds of stories. The question is the writing there? Are the characters likable and the like? And, I know Captain Marvel as a movie, some people had issues with that. Brie Larson didn't do themselves any favor in her likability as an individual, kind of like really railing against some of the online criticisms, many of which were unfounded. It's just this whole weird thing with fan culture and
something to that right on that point. I had another problem I had with the character in the books was there seemed to be almost no connection. Right. Do you know what I mean? Between Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel. Why take the Marvel name? They had none of the same powers. It was just she was a fan of the other. It didn't seem to make a ton of sense. A lot of times, there's been several Captain Marvels. There have been several, say Green Lantern. There's a way of passing the powers. They have the same powers. They're just another affiliate. They're a prodigy. Like whatever. There's a connection. There's no connection between Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel. But guess what? The MCU is resolving that problem and somehow connecting them. So that's what I like about this is that, yes, they did focus on Miss Marvel, but they actually took a look at what was wrong with what I think was wrong with the character. Yeah. And I'm so happy that they read my thoughts and the thoughts of other people who decided to yell on the internet and solve the character. So I think the character is much better than she was. So people who complain about Miss Marvel now, I think you got less to complain about.
And nice to have a bit more screen time for Monica Rambeau as well, who we did see in WandaVision. And we'll see where it goes. It's tough because my Captain Marvel is in the DC universe, and now they have to call him Shazam. Speaking of fixing things from the past, we have seen the remastering of past Star Trek TV series, such as the original series and Star Trek Next Generation, going back to the original 35 millimeter prints in some cases and fleshing out what was cut off by the 4:3 TV viewing experience. So some fans were pretty happy with most of the results there. In some cases, they've gone and updated the computer graphics again with mixed results, some of the effects there. But they're going back. They've gone back and updated a number of the movies to 4K HDR. So these are the Star Trek movies from the original series and the Next Generation movies. And the Kelvin Timeline, the 3 newer movies starring Chris Pine and the new cast, those have been available in these new formats for a while. But we're talking the original Trek original series-based movies from Star Trek the Motion Picture all the way up to, I guess, Generations. And then from Generations to, which was the last Star Trek movie, Gray? Nemesis, starring a young Tom Hardy. So now all of those are available in 4K HDR, Dolby Vision, and Dolby Atmos using a variety of techniques, including some AI-based techniques there. Sadly, some of our other TV series, such as Deep Space Nine, do not have even an HD treatment yet, as far as I know. Gray, what can you tell us about this process or the demand out there, what we're going to see on physical media versus streaming? It's great that they're available in streaming, but streaming still doesn't have the full, uncompressed bandwidth that you might see on a Blu-ray disc. So it's great that they're streaming in terms of availability, but some folks might still want physical media. So the UHD 4K Blu-rays here. What are your thoughts on what's happening here from Paramount and resuscitating or adding a new shine to these classic movies?
Honestly, like from the moment that Discovery hit, they realized that there was still appetite for Star Trek, and there was obviously appetite for New Trek with Discovery, but there's obviously a huge crowd of people who really love their old Trek. These 4 movies, Generations is a tough watch. It's hard to watch them crash the Enterprise D. It is hard to watch Kirk die by being shot in the back. Spoilers, it's been 20 years. It is hard. It's fun to watch Data curse. It's hard to watch him be scared. It sucks that Geordi's anyway. Generations has problems. The interesting thing is that William Shatner wrote a sequel to Generations called Star Trek: The Return. And the Borg go and get his body from Viridian 3 and reanimate him as a new sort of Locutus style thing, where he is then stopped by Worf and then teams up with Captain Picard. They go to the Borg homeworld and they're going to blow it up, but somebody has to stay behind, so he stays behind.
He's Tiberius of Borg.
Right. It's interesting because, the most recent, we'll get to this in my pick, but they did actually address this in Star Trek Picard season 3 because his body is actually at the Daystrom station. They picked it up off Viridian 3. Archer's body is there as well, as was Picard's body. It seems like if you Captain Enterprise, your body ends up at Daystrom station. There could be a Star Trek Zombies that would have done really well on that station.
It's almost like the footage from it's like the master tapes from all the old series. Instead, they've got bodies in the space station.
Right.
They could go and remaster those bodies into 4K.
So, really, like out of the 4, there's one movie worth watching here, and that is First Contact. Insurrection is a great show that's movie length. F. Murray Abraham's phenomenal. Nemesis.
It's a thing that happened.
I'm just really glad that we're getting Star Trek season 3, Picard season 3, because it seems like they're letting us go past that. But First Contact, like Die Hard in Space, Patrick Stewart as Bruce Willis, Freaks and everybody else down on the planet. Cromwell, what's not to love, right? Like, Magic Carpet Ride as the Phoenix blasts off, and Alex Kriga as it is delightful. And so it was great in SD. It was even better in HD. I haven't seen it in 4K, nor have I seen it in 4K HDR. I am stoked.
So the original series films from Star Trek the Motion Picture all the way up to Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, so that's what they're calling the original series movies, they were upgraded to 4K last year. And so, like you said, the new ones, Generations, First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis are the ones to get the overhaul with the Ultra HD Blu-ray set that was released on April 4th. So Scotty, my next question to you, Gray, and I'll ask this of Will as well, and then we'll get into our picks, is I know we're going digital, we're going streaming and all this kind of stuff. What properties, intellectual property, series, movies, TV shows, do you feel strongly enough about that you like to have physical media for, to have the best possible experience, audio and video wise, and not subject to the whims of streaming services removing them in the future.
Star Trek. I actually have a Blu-ray still on the TV shows. I have the VCD of Star Wars that came from Malaysia that had the original special effects, but I can't remember what it was. Kind of like a halfway special edition where they had updated visuals for some of the spacecraft, but they didn't have the extra scenes in. So it was kind of nice. Finding a VCD player is kind of hard to do though. But no, really, like Star Trek, I bought the Blu-rays all the way along, which is why I'm screaming at them to take my money for Deep Space Nine.
Right. Have they done HD versions of Voyager? No. So Voyager and Deep Space Nine are the two. What about Enterprise? Enterprise, have they done HD versions of Enterprise?
Hold on. I think they did have HD versions of Enterprise, and
okay. No 4K though. All right.
I actually made a fair bit of money taking the rips off of the satellite and putting them onto recordable Blu-ray discs at the time because nobody was doing it. There you go. Excellent. Come at me, Paramount.
Well, thank you for sharing. The authorities are on their way. Will, how about you? What franchises from the movie or TV universe do you feel that you must own physical copies of, so you're not relying on the vagaries of streaming services and licensing to be able to access them?
I have a couple, and it's partly because they're, I guess, more obscure or harder to get here, and ones that I like a lot. Also, I'm bad with money. So a couple of these are going to be weird for some people. So Venture Brothers, I don't know if anyone, I'm a huge fan of Venture Brothers. I don't talk about it that often, but I'm a big Venture Brothers fan. Avatar: The Last Airbender, not the blue avatars, but Avatar: The Last Airbender is in my mind an absolute classic. It seems to be getting some treatment again recently in terms of they seem to be re-releasing toys and stuff through a company called U2's. So it's in the zeitgeist again, I guess, but it's like a 20-year-old show at this point. Or almost 20-year-old show. And then the other thing is Justice League Unlimited, which I'm a huge fan of, basically the DCAU, the DC animated universe. So those things I all own on discs of various types. Some of them are in the HD variety and some of them are in the old school SD variety, but some of those are hard to find. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of all those things.
All animated picks, and those are good picks because being what they are, there's the sort of thing that could be, that could appear and disappear from various streaming services, and that's always a bummer, especially when you're only partway through watching a TV series, for example, and you're like, where's that last season?
Yeah,
where'd it go? For myself, I probably would lean toward where Gray is going there on the Star Trek side. It's terrible to say this given the human toll, but part of me is like, oh man, if we only had another lockdown, then our next project could be to go and watch all the Star Trek stuff from the very beginning, the TV series and all the movies, and that takes a while. Stephanie and I did that actually pre-pandemic for X-Files. We went through all like 200 episodes of X-Files. We should have waited for COVID to do that because that really set us behind on some series. For me, I would have to say the things that I always like to have the latest, newest, full quality versions of on Blu-ray, and eventually we'll start upgrading to 4K since we finally got a PS5. Don't have any 4K TVs yet. I would say the Alien series of movies, especially the first couple, Christopher Nolan movies, and Matrix movies, especially the first one, obviously. But like pretty much all the Christopher Nolan movies, it may be the first, like maybe not, Following and Memento don't need to be so much because they're not as blockbustery. And to add to that, actually the Villeneuve movies, right? Just because each of those, those series and those directors, what they create are feasts for the eyes and ears. They have amazing directors of photography working for them, and they care about the sound design and the score as well, whether whoever they're working with. So, and Interstellar being a real case in point for that sort of experience, and Blade Runner 2049 as another. So those are the things that I haven't really committed to, like full series of things necessarily. Maybe with the original Alien movies aside, which Stephanie surprisingly enjoys, even though she doesn't really like scary movies. So that's something that we watch at Halloween sometimes. I think we've talked about our Halloween picks before. All right, so let's go on to our picks of the week, or momentous picks, and on theme. Even though this is at least the third time we've talked about the show this year, but it's pretty darn good. So what's your
no spoilers? I'm not through the show yet.
Yeah, we need to have a no spoilers policy just in general, unless something is at least 20 years old. Gray, your momentous pick this week?
Is the second half of Star Trek Picard. I won't offer any spoilers. I'm just going to say that the original returning cast, which we all knew, it was in the poster, have done a phenomenal job. I'm really loving Ed Speleers. It's great. Amanda Plummer. Scenery chewed. It's delightful.
Oh yes,
great.
As the enemy, she's getting a lot of praise online for her role for sure.
Just like it's fascinating to watch an actor chew the scenery and twirl the mustache, and then when things get real, just right down the middle, just fire. Just watching her shift, shapes, I guess. Great.
Now, hear me out. Spin-off series with Shaw and 7 and 9.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And LaForge, one or both of the junior LaForges while we're at it.
Yep.
Okay, let's make it happen.
Like Liam's Heroes. Done.
So I think we're all in, and even those in our momentous orbit, friends of the show like Jamie and others, even though I think we agree that the first 2 seasons of Picard were maybe uneven at best, started off strong, and then this one has maintained its strength for the most part. I know some people had some issues with one of the more recent episodes the week before last. I believe there was a lot of talking, not as much action. I thought it was fine.
It's Star Trek,
but
you're allowed to have people talk.
Yeah, exactly. Go back and watch Next Generation. There's a lot of talking.
It's another boardroom scene. I'm shocked,
especially when they're getting low on their budget. So yeah, it's been fantastic. Great to get. It's always a little dangerous because you think, okay, how much are we leaning on the nostalgia and the whole getting the band back together angle? But if the writing's there, if the story's compelling, and they're throwing in some potential Section 31 shenanigans as well, like that's. I mean, when are we getting our Section 31 TV series? That's supposed to happen too. Anyhow,
it already did.
So
have to redact it.
Yeah, exactly. So hard agree on that pick of the week. Will, your pick of the week. I'm glad you went and saw this. I'm sorry I couldn't join you. And what was your momentous pick this week?
I have to say that I love this movie so thoroughly. It was so entertaining. I am a huge fan of Mario Brothers, all sorts of varieties, shapes, generations, and flavors. And the Super Mario movie definitely did not disappoint me. I know there have been some complaints online about various things, but for the most part, I think those people have no souls. They were looking at it in terms of a normal film that needs plot and character development. This is about a hero beating a villain. We don't need to have character development or growth. So there's just so much sort of references, nods, things that are set up and pay off, and things that are alluded to, and just absolutely a wonderful show. The music design was just so good. And I just love this movie so much. I have to say it's an early candidate for my pick of the year in terms of movie. It was just so good.
Glad to hear it. We'll have to see it sometime. I'm sorry.
Now you have to like Mario, though. This is the caveat. If you don't like Mario, don't watch it. This is for fans.
Who?
Mario.
Who's Mario?
Mario.
You mean
Mario.
You mean Mario?
Yes.
Mario.
Okay.
It's a me, Mario.
There we go. That's better. Now we're with the program. Whew. You don't go online and say Mario. You're going to get corrected really quickly by a lot of actuallys. And on a similar theme, my pick of the week my momentous pick is also based on a video game released. This movie was released on Apple TV Plus. It is, we've talked about it before. They made Tetris into a movie, and it's about the securing of the rights of the Tetris game for consoles and handheld devices. And it starts off a little slow. You're like, is this really happening? And it starts to happen, and then it just like, and next thing you know, you're in a full-blown Cold War era spy thriller. It stars Taron Egerton and all sorts of other recognizable actors. It's a fun ride, and if you have Apple TV Plus, I suggest you stop everything you're doing, especially if you have any joy in your heart and appreciation for video games of the 80s, and even just spy thrillers or just 80s nostalgia in general. Similar vibe in some sense to what we saw with the movie Air that we talked about previously. It was one of my previous momentous picks, directed by Ben Affleck, about the courting of Michael Jordan and the creation of the Air Jordan shoe line for Nike. So similar era. This is just a few years later, and a lot of nostalgia in there, but a good, fun story. And my wife Stephanie really enjoyed it as well. So it was a crowd pleaser in the Jutra household.
So you're saying stop everything and do it now?
Yeah, do it now. And if you don't have Apple TV Plus, then spend a few $100 and buy an Apple device and get it for a year or 3 months, whatever it is, or do the 7-day free trial and binge it. Just do it. Taron Egerton with a mustache. All right, projects. Gray, I know you've got to bounce. Any projects from you, Gray? And Gray's already bounced.
Yeah.
All right. How about you, Will?
So my project this week is another looper. Surprise, surprise. Retro. It's another one in the series. And I know you always ask what sets this apart. This one is fairly obvious. There tend to be older style beats. So, things like pop and lock type beats, or electro type beats, or sort of old synthy, hip hoppy type beats, a lot of 808s, 909s, 707s, that kind of fun stuff. All of the Rolands. So this is another one in that series, Retro 5. And I have to admit, I can't treat my children any special or say that I like any one more than another, but these are some of the most fun, the retro ones, and I kind of do them for me. And if people seem to like them, but I've said this in the past, and we've had a conversation. I love electro for some reason, so it's a little bit of an excuse just for me to do 3 or 4 electro beats and put them on a looper. So,
and can you tell us a little bit about the backstory for your hero image for Retro 5?
Oh yeah, did I tell you about this? I forgot that I told you about this. So I on part of my mid-journey death scroll at prompt 2:00 in the morning prompt fest, I was playing around, and I was trying to get various sort of images that were very 80s. And what could I think that was the most 80s? David Hasselhoff wearing sunglasses in sort of vaporwave style. So that was what I did. I also tried him as a marble statue. I tried him as a line drawing, but this is the one I kind of went with. So it's not, 100% David Hasselhoff, but that was the prompt I gave. Hasselhoff-ish, the heir of the Hoff.
Yeah.
And so, but I think the fact that I sort of went down a stream, because you can regenerate or, do variations. So I did variations that ended up not like looking the least like David Hasselhoff on purpose. So I got something that was a little bit more original, but it sort of had, Hasselhoff type hair, but didn't really look like him in the face.
Mm-hmm. No, it's looks great. Very very retro. Perfect for your choice of theme this week. And we've got 14 beats to choose from. Everything from Disco Millionaire to Testarossa to Vulcan Beat Breaker and Frying Saucers. I checked out your beats this afternoon while we were putting the show together. So.
I have to mention one more name. It's my favorite name there, which is Flare Bear Stare.
Oh, I did see that. Yes. Not to mention the rom-com starring Tupac. Okay. The lovely and talented Tasia Custodi has another video to share with us this week, and that is what is Bing Chat. Learn how to use Bing Chat. So last week she did a video on Bing Chat. About ChatGPT versus Google Bard, I believe. And now she's going further down the AI large language model rabbit hole here. So go and watch this. She needs the views. Something's going on with the algorithm and not getting as many views as some of her other things for some reason. So watch it, like it, subscribe, share as far and wide as you can. Let's get some love onto Tasia's videos. Tasia also has a mini podcast episode this week, or her Talk Techie to Me podcast, episode 13, Battle of the Chatbots. And it's kind of like an excerpt of the video that I mentioned from the previous week where she compares ChatGPT versus Google Bard. And it's a bit of a teaser to encourage people to go and get the rest of the story at her YouTube channel, which is, of course, youtube.com/Tasia Custodi. And you can find her podcast at tasiacustodi.com. And I forgot to mention, Will, of course, we can find your work at tabletist.net/artist/Molotov. So that's pretty exciting that we've got a direct link for that now.
Yeah.
And you can find out more about Momentous at momentus.tv/links, the team at momentus.tv/team. And now, believe it or not, momentus.tv/podcast has every single episode of Momentous TV in audio, or Momentous Live, in audio format from episode 3 onward. 1 and 2 were not salvageable, but up until last week's episode 107, they are all now available in audio format on our website. So you can go and click through on your web browser, on your computer or on your mobile device and use the built-in player there. Eventually we will add embeds of the videos to that. That's next job I've got to go do through for 100 plus episodes, but we really wanted to get the audio ones up there for people. And then hopefully by next week, fingers crossed, we will have these being distributed through the major podcast players. It might take a couple of weeks. It can take a while, but we will be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play Podcasts, all that kind of jazz. But for now, we're all caught up on the website at the very least. So you can check that out, momentus.tv/podcast. It's pretty exciting, I've got to say.
Yes.
Been a long road. And I guess that's
Good job.
it. Thanks. Well, we couldn't have done it without the team. Gray, sorry you had to leave early. We will see you next week. And hopefully we'll see Tasia next week as well. Get the band all back together. Will, it's always great to chat. And
Love chatting.
We hope you and your week are truly momentous.